don't know me, I'm your brother. I was raised here in this living hell. You don't know my kind in your world. Fairly soon, time will tell. You are telling me the things you're gonna do for me.
Like everybody. He's gonna eat a couple.
I ain't blind and I don't like what I think I see. Taking it to the streets.
And somebody else out before I let you go.
Taking it to the streets.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Journey to Service. I'm losing track of the parts, but I believe we're on part 4 now. Welcome back, Randy Kaiser, or Lord Randall Earl Kaiser, if you want to be a little more formal.
Thank you very much, William. And that's the name we're going to be running or walking under as the mayor. So we might as well use that name for these mayoralty interviews. Lord Randall or Kaiser, everybody's going to recognize that as soon as it comes up on the website for City of Calgary mayor candidates. It'll be a little unique.
Oh, so for those of you who are new to our conversation, Randall and I are having weekly interviews as Randall is getting ready for his campaign run for the City of Calgary mayorship. And how's that going?
Going wonderful. I'm treating it like most things I treat in life, with faith and trust and love, and just walking around and talking to people on the street. And the odd time I'll line up a meeting and meet with somebody. Yesterday I met with one fella and he got his wife out there to sign, and then he said, I gotta phone this other guy and the hairdresser signed. So we had 4 in a couple of minutes. And then I was walking along. It was a cute one. I got to tell this story. There's this lady. She lives in inner city, like East Village. Very well dressed, but very distinguishable. Okay, like it's the hat is and the tie is distinguishable for me now. People are smiling and not used to that. Like the one young lady said, it was kind of a grandpa look, but it'll work. She said, but the hat and the tie seemed to be getting attention. But this lady, my goodness, she had on a nice kind of 50s type hat. Earrings were colorful. She had a silver purse and a gold purse, one on each arm. And I've seen her a couple of times walking around. So she was sitting on a bench. And, oh gosh, we got into the most beautiful conversation about walking. She said, I walked from East Village, where I live, all the way up to Westbrook Mall the other day. And I said, good for you. She's a little older than me, but we had just a great conversation before I got out of there. Her autograph was on the paper. So, it's been that way. Like, it's just been a lot of fun, William. And, I'm just going to do it with this walking thing. And then as time gets closer, of course, we'll get some signs and that kind of stuff, but we'll do our social media thing and kick that up, and it'll be all good. We're ready to go.
How goes the vote count?
I'm up to 98, I believe now. So out of 100. So I'm cruising along. We'll get more than enough so that we make sure. They may fire a few in the garbage. Who knows, with these elections, Oh, sorry, I had to throw that one in there. Donald, go Donald, go.
Well, a lot of controversy in the world of politics these days, and we know what's going on down south right now in Arizona and the recount. But up in Canada this week, there was also a new Liberal budget released, and I recall that you had some feelings about that, and I thought I would ask you a little bit about your thoughts and how that relates to what you'd like to do with budget in Calgary if you were elected mayor.
Sure, yeah. Like, budget is kind of an odd word to me because it's people just don't really think in terms of math very much. They'll look at numbers, but then they don't bring the common sense to them. And I'll start this off with some numbers on this bug that's been around. And our current mayor saying that with almost tears in his eyes, you know, that we had our 2000th death, you know, from this bug, and that, you know, it's really sad, but we're just going to have to lock the city down again, and we're locked down again now, you know, except that you can go into restaurants outside. Yep, when you walk into the outside, like to get to your table, you have to wear a mask. But then when you sit down, you can take your mask off. If you have to go to the bathroom inside, you have to go in with your mask on. There's quite the creative rules that they're making, right? But the numbers was what I wanted to get to. So the 2000, nobody's really considering that we have 4 million people in this province, or over 4 million. I think we actually went over this last time a little bit too, didn't we? But it's worth repeating because it's entertainment, if nothing else. And don't get me wrong, I have compassion for every single human death, including the other 23,000 that usually die in our province every year. There's usually around 25,000 these days that pass away. But this year they related 20 or 2,000, just over 2,000 related to this bug that we've got. So those numbers don't really speak pandemic to me, but that's okay. So let's move on to the other numbers that we were discussing, and that is this budget, okay? And budgets are kind of weird words to me, because knowing that, again, nobody seems to want to do the math. Like 40%, these are some numbers I'll throw at the people here for now. So about 40% of our workforce, the people that are physically working prior to this bug coming around, worked in the government sector, okay? Directly paid through the government. About 40%. That's a big number. And I think it's probably increased because there's been a lot more people come out of the workforce on the private side, and then there's been an increase of jobs in the government sector. So the number probably has increased. I don't know what it is exactly, but and then of the 60% of the workforce that's out there, there's a big chunk of those that depend on at least one government contract to exist, okay? So when I say that, I'm talking about construction or electrical, or, you know, some of these private functioning companies that are actually, you know, labor that is not being paid a government wage. They depend on government projects, because government projects are everywhere now. And, you know, they're just exploding in our city and around the province. So we have this to start with. And then you start to say things like people on pension, people on assistance of some kind, income assistance, or, you know, the bug assistance that we're talking about now. The numbers are just astronomical as far as how much is going out of the government versus the private sector. So to say that we've got, you know, that number covered in a budget just doesn't make sense to me. Like, they're telling us stories is what they're doing, and by talking about budgets, you know, the taxes will never even come close to those things that I just described, let alone, you know, what's going on in the future. So the 390 billion that they proposed for this so-called budget is the question I want everyone to ask themselves is, where does that money come from? Okay, so a quick Google search would tell you that that money comes from the Bank of Canada. Okay, so this is going to get, I'm going to do it the best I can to simplify it for everyone, because it's kind of a convoluted little bit of a story here. Okay, it kind of goes back and forth when you talk about the Bank of Canada and the government of Canada being two distinct things in my mind, but maybe not, right? So the 390 million, the majority of that money came through the Bank of Canada buying bonds from the government of Canada. Okay, so bonds being bonds that are created by our government. So where do bonds come from in the first place? Well, they come from the bond to the human being, okay? That the human beings, the people that live on the land in Canada, the bond and the trust between them and the government, and the human being, whether they're giving it intentionally or not, giving the consent and the authority to the government to create these bonds, right? It's kind of a weird story, but that's the way it works. You know, the government creates these bonds. You know, if you want to look into the idea of birth certificate bonds or derivatives from licenses and passports and everything else that we put our autograph in, you're welcome to do that. I've learned a lot of that stuff myself, but it's entertaining for people to actually consider how this bond and this trust and this trust between the human being and the government has came into existence over time. So then we say, okay, if the Bank of Canada bought those bonds, who is the Bank of Canada and where did they get their money? And who owns the Bank of Canada, right? So if you do a quick Google search on that, it will come back to the Ministry of Finance for the Government of Canada, who is beholden to the Crown Corporation, okay? So then we start to say, okay, like the Bank of Canada sounds like it's the government, you know? So how can they buy from their own government these bonds? Well, in that story, then you have to bring in the idea of the Crown Corporation, right? Crown Corporation being the thing, the corporation that runs the monarchy, that tells the Queen what to do. So the Queen has no authority over the Crown Corporation. It's the other way around. I mean, Harry and Meghan told us all about that in their video not too long ago on why they left Europe to come here and stuff. And they basically were saying, you know, like, it's the firm, they called it, I think. I call it the corporate crown that tells the Queen what to do. And that coincides with my knowledge and my experience in the banking world with the barons and the dukes and the lairds and ladies where I function in, who said that the Queen is just a banking family member. So she's a cousin to the Bowers, right? So that makes sense to me that, you know, she's just working for the Crown. So we've got this number, right? This money this credit that's being created based on what? Well, most of it is promises, right? The promise from the human beings that live on the land to give that promise to the government that they've got a bond with them, that they trust them to do their business for them. But that was kind of given fraudulently to the people because they don't really know that they've given that consent to the government, other than voting for them and electing them. Otherwise, in a legal sense, you know, just ask yourself, well, how did I give that consent to the government? You know, like, besides voting for them, like, when did I do that? I don't remember doing that. You know, I'm having some fun, sorry, but go ahead, William.
I just was going to jump onto that and say, you know, you mentioned, you know, during this answer early on about things like the birth certificate and some of those other things. And I think there's probably a lot to be said. I mean, that's a pretty deep rabbit hole, but I mean, I know a little bit about it. You know, probably a little bit more than I do about it, but I'm sure there are a lot of people that don't know about it. Do we want to go into that a little bit more? Because that actually might speak to what you're talking about. But, you know, again, you could end up in a very deep hole if you talk about it for a long time. Do you have any maybe quickies that you can say? Because to me, all I'm seeing is, you know, a bunch of corporate entities, not real beings, not real flesh and bone. It's all, you know, make-believe, it almost seems like.
It is, William. It's the legal illusion, or the, you know, the illusion that we've done that we've given that consent. And it's all in the legal jurisdiction, which is under admiralty and maritime law, which puts that baby, when it's born, into a lost at sea story, right? And I'm not going to go on about it too much because I don't speak to it as well as many people do. I would recommend Anna von Reitz, just a Google search of Anna von Reitz. She explains it in detail in a beautiful manner. There's so many people on the web nowadays that you can, just birth certificate, bond, that kind of language, just Google it and you'll find it. But my favorite, and a friend of mine that I speak to privately and on the phone, and I love to pieces, is Anna von Reitz. So I think that's the best we could do with that one for now, William. And then, I think I've pretty well covered that as far as where that money is created. So,
Got it. Here's one question that I will ask you, because I know that most townships, cities, municipalities, most of them are incorporated, which means they're part of that same fiction, that same thing. Do you foresee in your platform, if you were to be elected as mayor of Calgary in the fall, would you unincorporate Calgary?
that's a good one. I mean, I wouldn't have the capability to do that. And adding to the municipal and the provincial governments being incorporated, the government of Canada is a corporation as well, William. And it's, we really have no ratified constitution here in Canada. We tried a few times when the Meech Lake Accord and a few other things, but there's really nothing other than the British North America Act, which is ancient stuff that doesn't relate really to a constitution, that, and so to speak. So some people say, well, what are we then? Well, we're kind of a military outpost for a fairy tale queen. Is the way I put it,
So you want to be in charge of that?
No, hell no. I don't want to be in charge of that. I think we should actually form a republic here in Canada and have a republic, public being for the people, and a renewal of some kind of a, proper organization of administration. I don't like to use the word government too much, because the future is going to be administrative only for these organizations. It's not going to be so much making rules and getting involved in economics. Oh my God, they want to be involved in everything economics wise. That's just like, going to China and coming into the airport and it says on the wall, capitalism and communism working hand in hand, which is one of my favorite sayings. We're going to move into creativism and administration processes for these organizations that help the people that don't really understand what I'm talking about, because there's a lot of them out there right now that are going to need assistance and guidance to come into this reality that, is happening. And
I was just going to add that, I wanted to do a sort of a slide step talking about the same kind of thing, but the one thing that you've mentioned in your previous, interviews with me is that you are anticipating a change, a global change, not just Calgary, not just Alberta, not just Canada, but we're talking all across the planet. And it's going to be quite different. But I don't know if we've ever really talked at any length or in any detail about what that might look like. And I'm sure it, like I've been listening to different sources and things like that as well. And everyone has a slightly different take or different picture, or different story about, what's happening, what's going to happen, what it's going to be like. Do you have a particular vision or thought about what we're moving into and what that might look like?
Yeah, I have knowledge. It's not vision, it's not a prophecy. I have knowledge because of the people that I deal with that are in the American and other nations' militaries, right? So Donald Trump's got to come into this. We got to use that word because you said it earlier. They're recounting right now in Arizona, and there's going to be some pretty interesting things come out of that. So what is going on in the world is that the militaries who were working for some corporate governments, like, and the United States being the major one because they have the major military of the world, the superpower, right? Between them and Russia, and China being third probably. But, those superpower militaries kind of had enough of these corporations that were, ransacking nations, especially in the Middle East, for commodities, like going in there and saying they have weapons of mass destruction and all that crap that they did to, after 9/11, and then saying to us, well, while we're here, we might as well wipe a bunch of people out and take over the oil fields. And that's what they did. And sorry about the wipe a bunch of people out thing. That's the insanity of this. And I don't mean to laugh, but at the same time, it's just so insane that what else are you going to do? If people haven't woke up to the fact that, Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney, especially Dick Cheney and his company Halliburton, are now pumping oil out of the ground in Iraq compared to what it was before, when these, nationals and patriots were doing it themselves and selling that oil. Now it's like Dick Cheney's company's in there, like, seriously, people, like, it's events like that lead to this conversation about why this is all happening. Okay, because that gong show, and the gong show in Libya probably being the one that I really like to talk about and present to people, because so few people know the story of Libya, where Muammar Gaddafi, potentially being a dictator and potentially causing harm to some people, just like my friend Roddy Duterte in the Philippines, was a little Western, don't get me wrong. And they went after some people, and there was some deaths, right? When they were making their government changeovers. Nothing like the deaths that are being caused by pharmaceutical industry and stuff in the Western world. But, that's the difference. People always think in terms of, shot people, chopped off heads in tribunals in Saudi Arabia. That's nasty stuff. Well, it's, it is what it is. I'm not defending it, and I'm not supporting it. But Muammar Gaddafi had built the most incredible banking system based on asset-backed banking, right? Oil and gold, was paying people when they got married from the government coffers, not in a communist fashion, but just gifting them with money to get them started in their lives. There was amazing things going on in that nation. They built these aquifers, and this is the most important story to me in this history in the last number of years that we just want to keep forgetting. Built these aquifers and was pumping water from the primary water source, okay? Deep underground primary water. That is wonderful water. And putting it in these aquifers on top of the ground to irrigate land in the deserts and potentially feed all of Africa. Like, it was just incredible, the project that he had started. And this American military at the time, following the lead of the corporate agenda, blew the shit out of that. Like, blew it all up. And there's civil war in that country ever since. But when they did that, and our darling Secretary of State at the time, HRC, said, threw those military generals under the bus in Benghazi and didn't go in there to help them. That, in my mind, was when things turned around for these military generals that are now basically moving towards martial law in the world, not just in America, but in the world, martial law, and taking this corporate agenda away from these corporate governments and moving it into a new reality. Okay, and that new reality, in my mind, is going to be going back to a republic in the United States of America, where Donald Trump will be the 19th president of the constitutional republic.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
That doesn't add up. He was 45. Now he's 19. How's that going to work?
Because drunken old Ulysses Grant, who was the 18th president of the United States, was drunk one night and he signed over the republic back to the corporation. Okay, that's the simple terms. 1871 that happened. And you people can think I'm telling stories, or you can do some research yourself, or just pick up a Wikipedia. Like a lot of this stuff is pretty right there for you to see. So yeah, he'll be the 19th president when he comes back. But does that mean he's the president? No, because he ran under the corporate flag. They have to have another election when that happens. And that's going to happen like probably in the next month or two. Like, it's just amazing how this is all folding out. And, am I telling complete, outright opposite stories to the mainstream media? Yeah, pretty much. But that's the way it is, folks. You can either choose that story or you can choose the one that's folding out, and not some prophecy or not some vision. This is from knowledge and experience and direct connection with military, not me directly with military generals, but the people I deal with are direct to military generals who also run the trading platforms that hold huge amounts, as we've said in the other videos, of asset-backed funding that is waiting to be released to the world. So between all of that, I may have lost people by now, but that's okay, William. We're here to expose the truth as well as answer questions. And if anybody wants to ask questions, put them in the comments and William and I'll go over them next week.
Absolutely. And Randy, thank you. Yeah, that actually sheds a little bit more light, because you've kind of alluded to it a couple of times, and we didn't go into any depth about it. We just kind of said things are changing, but we might have left the viewer wondering, well, what does he mean? What kind of changes? So you definitely touched upon it a little bit more here, although we still don't know exactly how it's going to look like. And let's face it, right now things look pretty chaotic out there. I mean, you've got almost complete opposite polarity stories going on here. You've got one side that seems like it's business as usual. Joe Biden's doing whatever he's doing in the States, and in Canada we're dealing with our COVID situation and making adjustments and doing all the things around that, or whatever we need to do to get life going, but in a different way, because they're all calling it the new normal, which is different. It just seems like we've got these two almost polar opposite viewpoints. And so I'm picturing myself as a viewer who maybe has been asleep for the last 6 months, and all of a sudden I've woken up and the world has got these two views staring me in the face, and I'm going, which one do I believe? Which one do I follow? Do you have any suggestions or anything in that way that could help people get a little bit more of a handle on this? Because right now we have to rely on people like yourself who have a few connections with, I won't say the higher ups, but the people who deal at a planetary level. Is there anything that you can do as a person who doesn't know too much about this yet, but would like to know more?
Again, probably the best thing they could do is ask themselves the questions and then ask someone else, and the mainstream media is going to start to bring some of this forward. Like, there's probably already talk on the mainstream. I never watch hardly any of it. The odd time I'll flick it on, but it's I can't think that they're going to avoid what's going on in Arizona right now as far as the recounts. And take a look at, there's lots of people that are on alternative media channels, YouTube and others, that are right there at the White House, which is still, under security of the military, and fences all around it. And is there an actual Joe Biden there or not? Like, I mean, ask yourself those questions. Like it's a very interesting time for that. And I'm entertained by it myself because I don't believe any of the mainstream Mockingbird media talk about, this Joe Biden character. It's just a character that's playing out in a movie, but that's pretty far out there kind of conversation coming out of me. So for the average person who's just been watching the television, and watching the news, yes, the thing is, ask yourself these simple questions and some of these numbers that we brought up earlier in this little interview, and then bring that to the politicians, like bring that to the media if you can reach them, bring that to, anybody that you consider an authority, in a political or a banking manner. Go into the Royal Bank of Canada and ask them if they're holding up any depositors, accounts right now. Like, ask little simple questions like that. That's what I want to suggest to people, William.
What about the media themselves? I mean, why would they not be reporting on this? Why would they be avoiding that? Do you have any comments on that?
That's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of it, William, is that people are just trusting, like the media trusts the government, that kind of thing. And, to say that they're outright lying to us and stuff, I don't really go there much. Like, it's just, it's just people are, we're trusting by nature. We love to be led, as human beings by someone else. There's very few people that just outright act in a sovereign manner and just take complete responsibility for everything they do and say. And that's not to run anybody down. That's not to say that it's a bad thing to be led. We're trusting, that this process is unfolding for the better of all. So, the media, I don't have a fight with them, like I go in front of some cameras if I find one. Like, I saw a guy with Global TV and he was standing in a park and I said, "What are you up to?" He says, "Well, I was here to film the snow, but the snow's pretty well gone." I said, "How about the new mayor?" I said, "You can take some pictures of me." And he goes, "Oh, good luck with that." He goes, and that was it. Like, they have their rules that they have to follow, these media people too. And that's what they're doing, is following rules, just like the government is following rules. We have a municipal mayor who's following the rules of the provincial premier, who's following the rules of the government of Canada, who's following the rules of Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci. Who are private.
If you get elected as mayor, won't you have to kind of do the same thing? I mean, there's still going to be provincial and there's federal and all of that, won't there? Or is that going to be different?
Well, no, it'll probably be still in transition by that time, and I will be. It's not an if, William. It's just that, we got to start getting rid of that if word. It's going to be Lord Randall or Earl Kaiser, the mayor. So what will I do with them? I'll ask them questions. Will I have the power to overturn laws and stuff? Hell no, because it's still at that time, I'm predicting that there's still going to be some kind of democratic mob rule process, but the mayor is going to just be a sovereign, as I am, and I'm going to act in that same manner as I'm acting right now. I'm going to ask people questions. If I get overruled or voted down in the council chambers, there's nothing I can do about that unless I can. And I can't change all the rules by myself. So I'm not naive enough to think I'm going to go in there and dictate what's going on. But am I going to change from the position I am now as a rather happy-go-lucky questioner of everything? No, I'm going to be the same. I'm going to ask people, well, what do you think? Are we up to 2,800 now out of 4.5 million? If it's that much that we've gained by the fall, like, does that sound like a pandemic to you? Like, should we continue to lock people out? And, we've pretty much wiped out the middle class mom and pop stores already. But if there's any left clinging, that we've been able to pump a few dollars of this relief money into their hands, should we really be locking people out of their stores? Like ask some questions like that. That's the way I'm going to approach it, William.
Cool. Are there, let's talk about the city itself now. We've been sort of talking
Sure.
a little bit more across the country, even across international lines. But let's talk about Calgary. We all know we talked about comfort income before, so we'll assume that that'll be part of your platform, if you will. But what else? What other kinds of things have you thought about? Other things that you'd like to see in Calgary, contribute in Calgary, change in Calgary? What kinds of extra policies or things that you'd like to adopt? What would you like to see?
Well, last night was the first time I really took a good look at the green line. Okay, so we have a blue line and a red line, our C train, they call it, the Calgary Transit. And last night I took a good look at a video and, the route and stuff like that, and some of the documentation on that. And I love it. I think that that's something that Calgary could use too. I use the city transit all the time. It's especially the train. I love it. The buses, the big ones are smooth, but those little ones, we got to get some springs in those babies. I'm telling you, it's like riding a freaking horse and carriage, and not one with springs in it. It's like a horse and carriage, ox cart. It's that rough. But this green line that goes from northeast Calgary down to southeast Calgary through the downtown, I think it's just more than well needed. It's a wonderful idea. And since we don't have anything in the idea of debt anymore, of course we can build that. Quit talking to me about budgets. Let's just build it. We got the money. We can create the money. But I think that if anything, I like the idea of going underground. Like they were talking straight up what we call Center Street, and that would then without taking buildings out on either side of Center Street, it would take a bunch of traffic lanes out. So it would take out the cars and expect people to go on the train. Well, I don't think that's going to happen. People are still going to choose to drive for a while yet, until we get into the next phase of this new world that we're moving
What
in.
might that be? I wonder. That's exciting.
Exactly. But for now, this first step with that green line, I say go underground, because we can tunnel. We've got tunneling machines that are astronomical these days, and we could go up in the air like the SkyTrain in Vancouver, or in Capilano, sorry, where you're living. We could do that, but I like underground. Then it's secure for many, many years, and it's safe and all that kind of stuff. I like that idea. So, grab her, bring it down underneath Center Street, and then down under the river and down under downtown, and bring it back up and into downtown. And you can have a few underground stations. Every other city in the world, from New York to Hong Kong to, they go right under the ocean in Hong Kong. And 2 or 3 times I've been in that subway station, and it's easy to do that kind of stuff nowadays. So yeah, I like that one. Other issues? Well, maybe I'll leave it back to you after I talked about that. You can maybe think of something else that we could bring up.
Well, not one for knowing exactly all the different issues within a city that I currently don't live in, but just shows you got a little homework to do between now and the next time we talk about some of the issues. But what about human interest issues, human stories? I mean, obviously the comfort income is going to help a lot of people, especially some of the homeless. You mentioned them in previous interviews that we've had. I mean, I'm just thinking about it. I'm thinking that comfort income is really going to solve a lot of problems if it is actually as easy as you've made it seem, with just the writing of the paper, of the creation of money. Is it really going to be that simple?
Well, like if people want to ask me that, then go take a look at the Liberal agenda for the government of Canada. They're looking at it themselves. They call it basic income, though, because they want to keep that limitation word in there, because the word lack and limitation, or limited, corporate, those kind of words in that legal jurisdiction, that's what, kind of keeps the masses working and in control kind of thing. Not in control, because they exploit and manipulate more than control, but the idea of a basic income program is already in the parliament, taking a look at it. So am I dreaming this up? No, it's been proposed in numerous places in the world. You go into some of the Northern European nations like Holland and the Scandinavian nations and stuff. There's some pretty major social agendas there. And they don't call it communism, but all the people are looked after. That's for damn sure. So, it's not a stretch. It's just, our number might be a stretch to start with. I don't know, and I'm not going to be able to decide that. But I know that getting people comfort and comfortable is going to eliminate a lot of things like crime, like drugs and stuff like that. Like why, depression caused by not having enough stress, God almighty, it's just so obvious to me that that's the next step for society as a whole. This civilization is to get people comfortable, because we've proven this year that we can create whatever we need. Let's just pump another 390 billion into Canada when we had a budget of 2 billion last year. We're up to 1.76 trillion dollars in debt now. In debt to who? Come on, just ask those simple questions of your government officials. Anybody else that's running for mayor, go ask them, who are we in debt to? See what they say.
I know who we're in debt to. Klaus Schwab.
Oh my goodness, William, you're going to get us banned from YouTube.
No, I'm just joking, but he ran into my brain. I mean, Klaus was in there talking about the comfort money and the no communism, but everyone's taken care of. And I'm going, that sounds a lot like the what do they call it, the global reset? What are they calling it over there with Mr. Schwab?
Pretty much, that's what they call it. And I mean, again, that's going to take research on the part of our fans out there, our audience, our golden audience, the AU audience. If you guys want to look into that yourself, William's done a lot of research on the world being the human construct, in my mind, Mother Earth being the heavenly plane of existence that we live on, whether it's round or flat, I don't care. But that is heaven, that is Mother Earth. Then we have this world, which is this human construct, which is truly has been run by Satan. Satan being the word described in Aramaic translation as crazy thoughts. And that's all it is. And these people that give me Satan. Well, look the word up. Like the original meaning of that word is crazy thoughts, and that's it, Interesting. So we've been running the world with crazy thoughts. So the end of this world, the apocalypse, the great revealing, is that we're going to start running this world in a conscious, common sense, civil manner for every human being and give them their comfort. And then from there, you just watch. Once this flow starts to happen for private project funding, not finance. I don't like the word quantum financial system, because the word finance still relates to the idea of interest and borrowing and all that crap, where funding is the way it's going to be.
Well, I brought up Mr. Schwab's name mainly because he was talking about the idea of this currency reset. But one of the things that he talked about, which I'd like to address a little bit here, and again, I know I'm going international as opposed to local, but it does tie into what we've been talking about. And what he was saying was that basically we would be agreeing to give up ownership of pretty much everything, property, everything, in order for us to get this comfort income, in order for us to be taken care of in that way. And it wouldn't quite be communism, but it'd be a sort of a loss of freedoms in a way. In other words, you wouldn't own anything, but you could rent everything, pretty much is the way I understood it. Is that what you're saying? Is that where we're going? Is we're going to be not owning anything and renting? Because you mentioned that as well in the previous interview, that you don't care to own anything in your name. So are we Klaus Schwab followers here?
Well, let's put it this way. How many people actually own anything now? You know, like the majority have a mortgage on their home, big majority, right? Even the wealthy. So there's how many people, I would guess, that actually have their mortgage paid off and are sitting on a property that the bank cannot say they own anymore. Okay, because the banks, like we talked about last week, when you put a mortgage on or whatever, the bank is basically the owner. You know, like they can take it anytime that you don't make a payment, they can take it. It's on their total asset sheet, right? It's not on your total asset sheet. So ownership to me is kind of an illusion to start with. You know, like we can say that we own a car or we own a piece of property or whatever, but if things change and all of a sudden, you know, there's inflation or, you know, this whole government legal jurisdiction looniverse talk that they talk about, you know, things like inflation is one, for instance. Then what happens? You know, oh gee, I can't make the payments on my land. Well, can't even pay the taxes on my land. That kind of taxes and inflation, that's the kind of stuff that, you know, governments move in and banks move in, and where's the owner? He's out on the street, you know. So I think that personally, I think that getting the idea of ownership out of our heads isn't such a bad thing anyway, and just manage money and manage assets. That's what I like to use as a word. And that's the way that these banking families, and very likely Klaus Schwab on the private side, runs his assets, would be from a trust as a managing director. And if we can learn that kind of stuff and learn that language, it'll be beneficial to us, because trusts are far away from the idea of being taken back by something. You know, that's when you think of the word trust in a physical sense, okay, whether that be assets or property that is put into trust, that word resonates with most people's minds as already out of the bankers and the government's hands. They can't take it anymore, you know. So that's the kind of language that I like to use. You know, it's the twisted game of the socialists like Klaus Schwab, or, you know, that want to make me sound like a twisted socialist too. But as I always say, under communism or socialism, man exploits man. Under capitalism, it's the exact opposite. So we are talking creativism, and I'm not going to get drawn into either side of that two-winged, whatever you want to call it, bat.
Right. Well, what I see you're saying, and you made a great point just in the very first thing you said in answer to that last question of mine. You basically said, well, do we really own anything right now when you think about it? And if you don't, even if you have, like, for example, you know, someone owns their house, they paid their mortgage, everything's free and clear, property is theirs, so we think. But taxes up to this point have continued. You've had to continue to pay your property taxes. What happens if you get into a really tight spot and you can't pay your property taxes? All of a sudden, that property that you own, apparently, the way I understand it, in the old world, no longer is yours. You lose ownership to it anyway. So, I mean, there is a way, up from some of the research I've done, there is a way that you can actually own something outright. But your point is, and it's a point well taken, at least by myself, is that maybe it is better not to own anything. Not necessarily in the way that, you know, Mr. Schwab might be thinking about it, but certainly in a way that could work for the individual, the person, because maybe there's something to be said about just the freedom of not saying this is mine and only mine. Because in a way that there's certain selfishness about that too, when you think about it. I mean, yeah, we've earned it. We've, you know, had to go through a lot of hard work and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in many cases to get what we got. But that was the old paradigm. Now we're swinging into a new paradigm. So I think what I'm starting to see from your answers, and I'm learning as I'm listening to your answers, because they're similar, but each week you give me a little piece more, little new piece. and I get to put it back into the puzzle and say, oh, that's what he means by that. So I guess what I'm saying is that you're kind of taking the best of almost like both sides of the argument or the equation and saying, we're putting it together this way, and it doesn't mean one's right or wrong. It's just this way is one that's one of collaboration, one of working together. Am I barking up the right tree with that?
Totally, William. That's exactly right. Because you're right. Ownership drives that whole mind into our minds, right? It just, and then the fear of people that have something, have property, is at least as much as people that have nothing. Those people are fearful. That's why they buy 3 or 4 houses. They're thinking in terms of the future and the potential of some disaster that would cause them to lose some of their assets. So they just keep buying more. And I don't think a lot of it is just straight greed. Like people, you might, if somebody has 7 Maseratis, okay, maybe that's greed, or 3 yachts or something like that. But people that buy more than one home, they're oftentimes, doing it not out of greed, but just out of, partly fear, because they think they're going to lose something. And
I can actually speak to that a little bit because, we invested in real estate in the past, me and some of my partners, and we did so ironically in Alberta. And, we did fine with it, but we didn't do it to become rich and, to be able to buy those 7 Maseratis and 3 yachts that you're talking about. We did it because we wanted to have money for our security for the future. And that's what a lot of people have been, doing with a lot of the work that they do and the money they collect and the things that they go through. So I can speak as an example of that. We were definitely in it to create a nest egg for the future. And we hear that about, RSPs and that kind of thing too. So, we're just starting to get on a roll here, but I would like to honor our time element as well. We're kind of getting to that point. Are there any other comments you'd like to add on what we've talked about today, either present or maybe earlier in the program? And just to kind of wrap things up in a nice little bow before we wrap up the show.
Yeah, that point that you made there, as far as what you guys were doing, owning real estate and renting it out can be a very conscious business as well. And the lady that I currently rent from here is a perfect example. She owns quite a number of homes, but it's so beautiful to see how she's contributing to these people that, it's like our floor of our duplex here has 3 bedrooms that she rents out. We share the kitchen, and then 2 of them have their own bathrooms. And then, downstairs there's more. So it's helping people that are low income people. Like I'm only paying $700 a month for my room. So it's helping people. And she's got a whole slew of these houses not very far from here. She took me over to get some autographs from the people there. And it was beautiful to see, she's doing a service with her ownership. She's not thinking of it. And yes, she's possibly making some money to put away and stuff like that. And you can't ever deny that of people either. I'm not saying that they're greedy because of that. It's, it's a fear of the future that we all have been through. And I don't think that way anymore, but I certainly did myself too, So I think that's about kind of ties that one up. I did want to mention too, I watched a brief video of what the conservatives consider the wisest or the most knowledgeable. Let's leave wisdom out because that includes spirituality, and I don't know what his spiritual views are, but I think his name's Pierre Polivier or something like that. Do you know that character? He's like a conservative in Canada leader, and he was talking about this $390 billion budget. So I watched it just for the hell of it to see what he had to say. And he referred to it as, oh, damn it. Am I going to be able to remember the words? Monetary. Oh, shoot, I better drop that and leave it till next time, because I'd like people to hear that and hear my points on that. But it basically calling it quantitative easing, or what's going on in Canada, or central easing, you know, because it's our central bank. But he had another term for it that was a term that a lot of people could relate to. Modern monetary theory. Okay, that's it. Thank you for waiting for me for a second there. The modern monetary theory is what this quantitative easing kind of a strategy is about, right? But his explanation of that then tore into the idea of taxes and inflation. And I listened to this guy talk and I thought, man, he's educated. Don't get me wrong. Like, he's a very smart man in that world of economies and of budgets and all that stuff. And his basic explanation was that, you know, when we drive this much money into economy, we're going to drive up inflation. And he talked about the gas prices increasing and the price of lumber increasing in his little speech in Parliament. And then he said, so then what do we do to control inflation? We tax the hell out of it so that it brings it back. And I'm listening to him thinking, you know, the conservative-minded capitalist people that were listening to him are thinking, yeah, that Trudeau spending all this money and thinking about debt. And I'm thinking, God, you guys, like, you're just, again, in that duality mentality of these two sides of some insane legal jurisdiction, looniverse government that is never going to stop if you keep battling back and forth like that, as to, we got to be more conservative. No, spend more money. We're more, you know, it was just amazing. And I found it on my LinkedIn feed, and the people that were supporting this guy, I just had to make some comments myself and say, okay, folks, let's just take a look at this from a common sense perspective. Like, really going into this game of back and forth is not going to get us anywhere. But anyway, that's where it was. And I think we should tidy it up, William. You give me some last words. You always have such kind eyes and you're so patient with me. I appreciate you so much, my brother. But yeah, let's tidy it up.
I was just going to say that we found at the beginning of that answer that you don't have 7 Maseratis and you live in a duplex and you pay rent. So you don't even own anything. As you're true to your word. You say you don't want to own anything and you don't. But you're definitely a different type of candidate. You don't see too many candidates that, you know, don't own their house or that kind of thing. So it's something new for the folks to consider. You know, when you're saying what you're saying, you're living what you're saying too. And you've heard that expression as well, right? Walk your talk. And I don't know anyone who walks your talk better than you do. So on that note, I think I'll ask you for a final blessing, and maybe next week we'll talk a little bit more about community and talk about what that can bring into Calgary with more of a community mindset. Well, brother, first off, I have to say I love you because you walk your talk too. You have a good, conscious business mind. You have wonderful government right here on your shoulders. You control your own mind and your own spirituality, and I really appreciate your assistance in this. So with peace, harmony, love, abundance, and freedom for everyone and everything every day on our minds, William and I saying, catch you next week with abundance, sovereignty, health, love, and euphoria for all. Cheers, William. Thank you. Love you, brother. Bye.